gentlemen. Welcome. I think there's still people outside. Let me call them in quickly. Huh? Yeah, thank you. Anyway, my name is Olaf Kolkman. I'm with the Internet Society. We've been speaking earlier today. The session that we are organizing now goes a little bit more in depth. And it goes in depth in two different ways that, and I don't want to talk about me too much, but it goes into two ways that interest me personally. One is sort of the technical infrastructure for trust. That's a topic that has been of my interest. I've been involved in internet standardization, and this is sort of a tangential work that is happening within ETSI. Another interest of me is indeed cyber security and cyber capacity building. That interest comes through side responsibility that I have as treasurer of the Global Forum for Cyber Expertise. And I haven't heard many people talk about the Global Forum for Cyber Expertise, but that's an interesting platform for any nation who wants to build their cyber capacity, cyber capacities. It is a cyber capacity a forum where nation states, we have members, I believe it's about 110 members at the GFCE. Those are nation states, private companies, and not non-governmental organizations. We have partners in the form of businesses, and we come together and organize various tracks to enhance the capacity of nations to protect themselves. One of those things is, for instance, the Sybil platform, in which there is an inventory of cyber-related projects that you can look up and see if there's something that you can build on. And I would advise people here that if you have a cyber capacity building project, to enter it in the table so that you can find each other. Another thing that the GFCE does is a matchmaking program where nation states who need help can call upon other nation states to help. So if you have exemplary work in building cybersecurity strategies and exemplary work, for instance, that is going to be presented by Ahmed, that would be a place to exchange that information. So I would urge you, and sorry for the diversion, to look at the work of the GFCE. With all that said, back to the realities of building trust. Nick Pope is with us. Nick Pope serves as the Director of Security and Standards Associates, who is offering IT security and standard consultancy to financial, commercial, and governmental sectors. He chairs the ETSI technical community on electronic signatures and trust infrastructures, and aids Open Banking Europe in applying eIDAS to pan-European banking, which is a European identity scheme. He's a participant in CEN and ETSI. Those are two formal standards organizations in Europe. And he focuses on electronic identities and distributed ledger technologies. He's been instrumental at the eIDs regulation and the electronic signature directive and standards development since 1999. Nick, that's a long resume. Without further ado, please enlighten us.
Yes, thank you very much for that introduction. Yeah, I keep being reminded how long I've been involved with this area, but what I'd like to do as chairman of ETSI is present the European perspective on how we manage trust and the standards involved. You mentioned cybersecurity, and at the end, if you give me a few extra minutes, I would like to just say what's happening in Europe to align what we're doing in trust services with the cybersecurity. So firstly, I just want to cover what I had already planned to discuss. Firstly, I will give an overview of what ETSI have been doing over the last 20 years in building up a strong framework for electronic signatures and the supporting trust infrastructures. Then I'll say a bit about a study we carried out, which has fed into the European activities on managing cross trusts to what we call third countries. So that's countries outside Europe. And then I want to say briefly about a new program on managing trusts internationally outside Europe with a third country trust list program, which I'll say briefly about, but I'd like to direct detailed questions to a colleague. I'll come back to this in a moment. So the framework of standards covers quite a large area. We start at the bottom with a general framework which defines all the basis for standards and what they provide. On top of that, we've got standards which are produced by our partner in Europe, CEN, which defines the requirements for signing devices, including remote signing devices. We have guidance based on the European guidance on cryptographic suites. The central point of our work is looking at signature creation and validation and the procedures around that. Then we have a set of standards looking at the trust infrastructure supporting digital signatures, the trust applications, including archival and remote electronic mail. And on top of all this, there is the trust list system, which I would go on to describe later on. So this is trying in a single slide to present all the different areas of standardization, but I wanted to highlight some of the areas, such as the range of formats that we cover. Will fit in our signature format with a range of formats: XML, CMS, which is the ASN1 binary format, PDF, zip containers, JSON, and most recently we're working on align it with the work on CBOR. And also just highlight, we have a strong infrastructure, trust infrastructure standards for aligning with the European requirements on trust infrastructures supporting digital signatures. If you want to follow up the details, you can go to our website, which gives links to all the standards that are available. So moving on to our view on what's required for mutual trust. This is based on a study we carried out a few years ago, which included a visit to your region and talking to people in this region, Asia, South America and North America. And out of this, we identified 4 areas of mutual recognition that's required. So there's need to be some equivalence to the signature of electronic, the recognition of electronic signatures in a legal context, being equivalent in Europe to a handwritten, but we need a common basis for that. Then there's a need underpinning that is a regulatory oversight based on regulatory overseeing by a supervision authority, which is representing the government and regulating the provision of trust services based on a independent audit, which is based on commercial audits. And this is auditing against best practices, and we have a number of best practice standards which are based on international and particular CAB Forum based practices. And then underpinning all this is a common form of trust representation using trusted lists, and there needs to be a way of mapping between all these different ways of representing trusts from the European point of view to a trust list. So just to say a bit more about what the use of the trust list. So the provision in a trust list is based on equivalence. So we're expecting each nation to have its own equivalent to a trust list, which if we can find equivalent, then we can apply a mutual recognition. And this is where I've got a colleague who was unable to attend from the European Commission, but we've got a big activity going on in trying to establish trust lists, not internationally, not just within Europe, but internationally. So nationally, we've been operating for 5 years or no, for more, about 8 years now since the 2014 regulation. We've had trust lists operating for each European nations, and this is brought together through a European trust list of trust lists, which is managed by the European Commission. So anyone wanting to validate the trustworthiness of a service can first of all look up the country that's applicable to through the European list of trusted lists, which then points to one of the national lists, which will then list the details, including the trusted certificate for each of the trusted service which is recognized by that nation. So I mentioned that there is a third country trusted list being established, which not is to the same format and concept as a national European list of trust list, but is pointing to other international trust lists. So we have a list of what's called a list of third country trusted lists, which potentially is open to any party in the UN Charter, but requires some mutual recognition agreement, which means that it is seen as legally and technically and management-wise equivalent to the European requirements. And if that mutual recognition is achieved, then it will be added to that list of trust lists. And there is a requirement that the nation then establishes its own list of trusted services. And if you're not operating a trusted list, we have done some experiments with parties where you can map a hierarchical PKI into a trusted list, and trusted lists are already applied by browsers. So I don't see any problem with going from a hierarchical structure to a structure based on trusted lists. So it's unfortunate that we haven't time to go into the details of how the European third country trusted list is operating, but I do urge you to, if you're interested in achieving interoperability with EU, to read all the documentation that's available through this link. And if you want to see the trusted lists for third countries, which is currently just specific to digital signatures, or what we call ADES in Europe, you can see that. And at the moment, it's just limited to one country, Ukraine, which has got urgent need for secure interoperability. with Europe. So just to conclude, this is where you can get further information. I mentioned the list of current standards. There's also a search mechanism where you can pick out and download standards. There's a list where you can email list, you can get all the latest information. And if you want to get more information about the EU pilot, there's another page. And any further questions, feel free to contact me. Just while I've got the floor, I'd like to cover the issue of cyber security and trust services. And in Europe, there is a strong overlap between them. There is a new European regulation called NIS2, looking at secure infrastructures supporting secure networks, and it is required that the requirements of the regulation on trust services also meet the requirements for the NIS2 directive. And also we are working on updating our standards so that it automatically incorporates all the regulatory requirements for applying cyber security requirements to trust infrastructures to our audit regime. So an audit against in the future against our requirements for trust services will also incorporate all the requirements for cyber security audit. And also we're working in ETSI, we have a special committee which we're called TC Cyber, which concentrates on cyber security issues, and we're regularly in contact with each other, ensuring that there's a good overlap between the work on cyber security and trust services, and applying cyber security to trust services, but also applying trust services to supporting identity and signature requirements for cyber security. Okay, so I thank you very much for your giving me the time to present the work on EU. I apologize for the quick presentation, but happy to help further with any questions. Back to the chairman.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, well, please hold on. We'll have discussion later. Ahmed, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Olaf, and thank you, Nick, for this very fruitful presentation. Our technical moderator, can we present the presentation, please? Thank you very much. And this presentation this afternoon, allow me to turn to Arabic, Olaf, if you allow me to do that. So